you all for coming here today to our Voices of a People's History event at San Diego City College for Constitution Week. Yay! My name is Larissa Dorman. I have the pleasure of teaching in the Political Science Department here at City College, and I'm also a faculty advisor for BEAT, Bringing Education and Activism Together. This is an event that we do every semester, and we're very, very excited to work with a couple of other clubs this semester, as well as many in the past, Visionary Feminists and Veterans for Peace, to put this on for you today. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of these students that came in early this morning to rehearse, so let's give them a round of applause. But really, an event like this wouldn't have happened if we didn't have folks like Howard Zinn as role models. How many of you know who Howard Zinn is?
Yeah.
Okay. So Howard Zinn unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. He was a historian. He was someone who decided to look at the historical record from the viewpoint of minorities and women in history, the folks that often are left out of our history books, yes?
Yeah.
And so today the speeches that we're going to share with you, you may not know the speakers. You may have never heard of some of them. Some of them you may have heard of in the past, but maybe have never heard this version of their speeches. So what I'd like to first do this morning is honor Howard Zinn with a memorial from one of his very dear friends, Noam Chomsky. But first I would like to speak one of his lines that I think is important today. It's a quote from Howard Zinn. "To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending the spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory." Howard Zinn. So I want to read from Noam Chomsky's Remembering Howard Zinn that he wrote about a year ago. "Howard's remarkable life and work are summarized best in his own words. His primary concern, he explained, was the countless small actions of unknown people that lie at the roots of those great moments that enter the historical record. A record that will be profoundly misleading and seriously disempowering if it is torn from these roots as it passes through the filters of doctrine and dogma. His life was always closely intertwined with his writings and innumerable talks and interviews. It was devoted selflessly to empowerment of the unknown people who brought about great moments. That was true when he was an industrial worker and labor activist, and from the days 50 years ago when he was teaching at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, a black college that was open mostly to the small black elite. While teaching at Spelman, Howard supported the students who were at the cutting edge of the civil rights movement in its early and most dangerous days, many of whom became quite well known in later years. Alice Walker, Julian Bond, and others, and who loved and revered him, as did everyone who knew him well. And as always, he did not just support them, which is rare enough, but also participated directly with them in their most hazardous efforts. No easy undertaking at that time, before there was any organized popular movement and in the face of government hostility that lasted for some years. Finally, popular support was ignited, in large part by the courageous actions of the young people who were sitting in at lunch counters, riding freedom buses, organizing demonstrations, facing bitter racism and brutality, sometimes death. By the early 1960s, a mass popular movement was taking shape. By then, with Martin Luther King Jr. in a leadership role, and the government had to respond. As a reward for his courage and honesty, Howard was soon expelled from the college where he taught. A few years later, he wrote the standard work of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the major organization of those unknown people whose countless small actions played such an important part in creating the groundswell that enabled King to gain significant influence, as I am sure he would have been the first to say, and to bring the country to honor the constitutional amendments of a century earlier that had theoretically granted elementary civil rights to former slaves, at least to do so partially. No need to stress that there remains a long way to go today. Howard was there on the front lines, unflagging in his enthusiasm and inspiring in his integrity, engagement, eloquence, and insight, a light touch of humor in the face of adversity, and dedication to nonviolence and sheer decency. It is hard even to imagine how many young people's lives were touched and how deeply by his achievements, both in his work and in his life. Thank you. So this morning we have two moderators who will be guiding us through our program, Stephanie Wells and Maurice Martin. Let's give them a hand.
Mario Savio was a student leader of the free speech movement at UC Berkeley who fought against the unwillingness of the administration to allow campus-wide discussion of civil rights. Savio believed it was a violation of the First Amendment right of free speech to ban speech having to do with civil rights, Vietnam, and anti-nuke discussions on a college campus. During Freedom Summer, campus organizations united and demonstrated against university policy. They occupied Sproul Hall and stopped a police car from arresting protesters by blocking the car for over 27 hours with protesters' bodies. Here is a portion of Savio's speech on that historic day, performed by Alan Calvo.
Now, there are at least two ways in which sit-ins and civil disobedience can occur. One, when a law exists, is promulgated, which is totally unacceptable to the people, and they violate it again and again and again till it's rescinded, appealed. All right, but there's another way. There's another way. Sometimes the form of the law is such as to render impossible its effective violation as a method to have it repealed. Sometimes the grievances of people are more, extend more, to more than just the law, extend to a whole mode of arbitrary power, a whole mode of arbitrary exercise of arbitrary power. And that's what we have here. We have an autocracy which runs this university. It's managed. We are told the following. If President Carr actually tried to get something more liberal out of the regents of his telephone conversation, why didn't he make some public statement to that effect? And the answer we received from a well-meaning liberal was the following. He said, "Would you ever imagine the manager of a firm making a statement publicly in opposition to his board of directors?" That's the answer. Well, I ask you to consider. If this is a firm, and if the board of regents are the board of directors, and if President Kerr is in fact the manager, and I tell you something, the faculty are a bunch of employees and we are the raw material. We're a bunch of raw materials that don't mean to have any process upon us. Don't mean to be made into any product. Don't mean to end up being bought by some clients of the university, be they the government, be they the industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone. We're human beings. And that brings me to the second mode of civil disobedience. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears, upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. That doesn't mean, I know it will be interpreted to mean, unfortunately, by the bigots who run the Examiner, for example, that doesn't mean you have to break anything. 1,000 people sitting down someplace, not letting anybody by, not letting anything happen, can stop any machine, including this machine, and it will be stopped.
like to invite those who are sitting on the stairs or on the side of the wall, please, if you can, there's plenty of seats available here. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, we invite you to do so. The American Indian Movement, known as AIM, began in Minneapolis, Minnesota in the summer of 1968. Frustrated by discrimination and decades of federal Indian policy, activists came together to discuss the critical issues restraining them and to take control of their own destiny. Out of that ferment and discrimination, the American Indian Movement was born. The revolutionary favor of AIM's leaders drew the attention of the FBI and the CIA, who then set out to crush the movement. Their ruthless suppression of AIM during the early 1970s shown the seeds of the confrontation that followed in February 1973. When AIM leaders, Russell Means and his followers, took over the small Indian community Wounded Knee in South Dakota in protest of his illegally corrupt government, when FBI agents were dispatched to remove the AIM leaders and occupiers, a standoff ensued. Through the resulting siege that lasted over 71 days, 2 people were killed, 12 were wounded, and 1,200 arrested. Wounded Knee was a sentimental event, drawing worldwide attention to the plight of American Indians. Our own Jessica Magpie will now share the official statement of AIM officials about Wounded Knee.
The Indian people who have tried to function through the white man's system since the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, who have seen their land taken away and their hopes destroyed, saw the first real effort in years to regain power over their lives at the liberation of Wounded Knee. Hundreds of Indians, representing more than 75 different tribes, supported the just demands of the Oglala Sioux on the Pine Ridge Reservation at the risk of their own lives and their freedom. The Sioux, like every Indian tribe in the country, have ceded land to the U.S. government, and in payment for that land, the U.S. government is supposed to provide us with certain goods and services. They do not do this. Instead of providing services, they provide us with tyranny. At Wounded Knee, we finally said, to hell with that. We are going to honor your treaty with us from now on, and we are going to force you to do that, because if you do not, you will have to kill us. That was the point of Wounded Knee. We have a treaty that is 105 years old, and for 105 years, it has been continually violated. It is time for the United States to live up to its pledges to the Indians that it has signed. The U.S. government has signed 371 treaties with Indian people, and the result of these treaties is that our water has been stolen, our minerals have been stolen, and our land has been stolen. All of this must be paid for retroactively. We are the landlords of this country, and at Wounded Knee, we showed up to collect. These treaties supersede any state laws, and in fact prevail over federal law. If this country is going to live up to its constitution, then it first, in fact, must live up to its treaty commitments. We still have to go to court to ascertain treaty rights. Once again, we have to rely on the white man and wait for him to give us what is already ours. If he goes against the Constitution and convicts us, he will be proving to the world that this is really a police state instead of a free country. The Wounded Knee trials are the most important of the century. They will expose America and its practices and its founding principles. Statement from the Wounded Knee occupation in 1970.
The industrial workers of the world were the first American union to accept workers from all fields, of all backgrounds, ethnicities, and genders. In 1923, they claimed over 100,000 members, many of which were migrant workers who traditionally had not been organized. The IWW believed that workers should be united as a class and believed that the wage system should be abolished. Andres Sandoval and Claudia Flores will now perform the IWW preamble.
The working class and the employing class have nothing in common. There can be no peace so long as hunger and want are found amongst millions of working people, and the few who make the employing class have all the good things of life. Between these two classes, a struggle must go on until all the toilers come together on the political as well as the industrial fields, and take and hold that which they produce by their labors throughout an economic organization of the working class without affiliation with any political party. The rapid gathering of wealth and the centering of the management of industries into fewer and fewer hands make the trade unions unable to cope with ever-growing power of the employing class, because the trade unions foster a state of things which allows one set of workers to be pitted against another set of workers in the same industries, thereby helping defeat one another in wage wars.
The trade unions aid the employing class to mislead the workers into the belief that the working class have interests in common with their employers. These sad conditions can be changed and the interests of the working class upheld by an organization formed in such a way that all its members in any one industry, or in all industries if necessary, cease work whenever a strike or lockout is on any department thereof, thus making an injury to one, an injury to all.
On August 28, 1963, the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom brought more than 200,000 demonstrators to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to fight for civil rights. While the rally is best remembered for being the occasion for Martin Luther King's historic I Have a Dream speech, perhaps the most militant speech of the day was delivered by John Lewis, a young SNCC leader from Alabama. But pressured by Martin Luther King and other established civil rights leaders, Lewis had to tone down the text, which spoke of revolution, and argued to President John F. Kennedy supposed civil rights legislation was too little, too late. Here is the text of the original speech he had hoped to deliver that day, performed by Jessica Tittle.
We march today for jobs and freedom, but we have nothing to be proud of. For hundreds and thousands of our brothers and sisters are not here, for they are receiving starvation wages, or no wages at all. While we stand here, there are sharecroppers in the Delta of Mississippi who are out in the fields working for less than $3 a day, 12 hours a day. While we stand here, there are students in jail on trumped-up charges. Our brother, James Farmer, along with many others, is also in jail. We come here today with a great sense of misgiving. It is true that we support the administration's civil rights bill. We support it with great reservations, however. Unless Title III is put in this bill, there is nothing to protect the young children and old women who must face police dogs and fire hoses in the South while they engage in peaceful demonstrations. In its present form, this bill will not protect the citizens of Danville, Virginia, who must live in constant fear of a police state. It will not protect the hundreds and thousands of people that have been arrested on Trump charges. What about the 3 young men, SNCC field secretaries in Americus, Georgia, who face the death penalty for engaging in peaceful protest? As it stands now, the voting section of this bill will not help the thousands of black people who want to vote. It will not help the citizens of Mississippi, of Alabama, and Georgia who are qualified to vote but lack a 6th grade education. One man, one vote is the African cry. It is ours too. It must be ours. We must have legislation that will protect the Mississippi sharecropper who is put off of his farm because he dares to register to vote. We need a bill that will provide for the homeless and starving people of this nation. We need a bill that will ensure the equality of a maid who earns $5 a week in a home of a family whose total income is $100,000 a year. My friends, let us not forget that we are involved in a serious social revolution. By and large, American politics is dominated by politicians who build their careers on immoral compromises and ally themselves with open forms of political, economic, and social exploitation. There are exceptions, of course. We salute those. But what political leader can stand up and say, my party is the party of principles? For the party of Kennedy is also the party of Eastland. The party of Jarvis is also the party of Goldwater. Where is our party? Where is the political party that will make it unnecessary to march on Washington? Where is the political party that will make it unnecessary to march in the streets of Birmingham? Where is the political party that will protect the citizens of Albany, Georgia? Do you know that in Albany, Georgia, 9 of our leaders have been indicted, not by the Dixiecrats, but by the federal government for peaceful protests? But what did the federal government do when Albany's deputy sheriff beat attorney C.B. King and left him half dead? What did the federal government do when local police officials kicked and assaulted the pregnant wife of Slater King and she lost her baby? To those who have said, be patient and wait, we have long said that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We are tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again. And then you holler, be patient? How long can we be patient? We want our freedom and we want it now. We do not want to go to jail, but we will go to jail if this is the price we must pay for love, brotherhood, and true peace. I appeal to all of you to get into this great revolution that is sweeping the nation. Get in and stay in the streets of every city, every village and hamlet of this nation until true freedom comes, until the revolution of 1776 is complete. We must get in this revolution and complete the revolution. For in the Delta in Mississippi, in Southwest Georgia, in the Black Belt of Alabama, in Harlem, in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and all over the nation, the black masses are on the march for jobs and freedom. They're talking about slow down and stop. We will not stop, but we will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today. By the force of our demands, our determination, and our numbers, we shall splinter the segregated South into 1,000 pieces and put them together in the image of God and democracy. We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop, and we will not, and cannot be patient.
Young widow in the war that's being fought in Vietnam. And I have 2 infant daughters, and I do the best I can. They say the war is over, but I think it's just begun. I remember I was 17 on the day I met young Bill. His father